Next up are proteins. Right? So proteins are another group of biological molecules along with carbohydrates and lipids. Proteins do most of the work for our cells, right? So if we're moving things around inside of a cell, or moving a cell, or moving the body, or speeding up a chemical reaction, or providing structure, most of those things are provided by proteins. Okay? So, and when it comes to the function of proteins, there's a large diversity of functions for proteins. Proteins are made of smaller units called amino acids, right? So maybe you've heard that term before. So there are 20 different types of amino acids that are used to make all the different proteins in the human body. Examples of proteins you might be familiar with include hemoglobin protein, which is found inside of our red blood cells and carries oxygen. Or maybe you've heard of antibodies, which are defensive proteins found in our blood. Collagen protein in our skin, and keratin protein in our hair and nails. So here we can see two examples of proteins. So collagen protein and then hemoglobin protein. They have very different shapes. So the shape of a protein is really important for its function, right? And different proteins do have different shapes. And ultimately what determines the shape of a protein is actually your DNA. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So here in this picture we see an important type of protein called an enzyme. So an enzyme is a biological molecule that acts as a catalyst. What that means is that it makes more chemical reactions happen than would otherwise be possible. So chemical reactions are really important for human physiology. Chemical reactions are metabolism, and metabolism is physiology. So if we want something to happen in the human body, that means a chemical reaction has to occur. And enzymes make these chemical reactions happen at a rate that is possible to sustain life. So in this particular example, we can see an enzyme shown in purple, right? And then we see these two little brown blobs. And the two little brown blobs come and they land on the enzyme. And all the enzyme is doing is providing a place for a chemical reaction to occur. Right? Once the two little brown blobs get close to each other, a bond is formed between them. Don't forget, chemical reactions are just the making and breaking of chemical bonds. So here the enzyme is helping to make a bond between these two little brown blobs. Right? So this is a really good example of how an enzyme can help to speed up a chemical reaction. It's providing just a location for the chemical reaction to occur. What's nice is that enzymes can be used again and again and again. Right? They're just like a stage that is supplying a location for the chemical reaction to happen. So they don't really get used up. They're not supplying energy to the reaction. They're just making it more likely that the reaction will occur by providing a place for it to happen. If you build it, they will come, sort of thing. Our last group of biological molecules are the nucleic acids. So this is usually the least familiar category of biological molecules. And that's because this one is not found on your nutrition facts panel on the side of your cereal box, right? Nucleic acids are in the food that you eat, but they're just not there at a level high enough to be considered nutritional. Nucleic acids include things like DNA, RNA, and ATP. DNA and RNA both function in a process called gene expression. So gene expression is the process of reading the information stored in your DNA, in your genes, and using that information to make proteins. So DNA actually has the code for making proteins, and RNA kind of helps us to read the code in the DNA in order to make the protein. ATP is very different. It's related structurally to DNA and RNA. However, it is used as the energy currency of our cells. And I'll talk more about ATP in a little bit. So here in the picture we can see the classic helical structure for DNA, right? DNA is actually made of smaller pieces called nucleotides. And a nucleotide has three parts to it. It has a phosphate group, which is a phosphorus with some oxygens. A nucleotide also has a sugar, and then it has something called a nitrogenous base, which is just a group that has nitrogen as a part of it. And there are 4 different types of nucleotides that make up DNA, and you're probably more familiar with them by their letters, A, T, G, and C. So a DNA molecule is made of millions of A's and T's and G's and C's put together. And the code in DNA is actually the sequence of the A's and T's and G's and C's within the DNA molecule. So when I said DNA carries the code to make protein, right, it's the code in the particular sequence of those nucleotides that helps us to make a protein. So here's a closer look at the DNA helix, and you can see that we have lots of A's and T's and G's and C's. Right? And it's the DNA molecule is made of 2 strands that are held together and spiraled, right, like a helical staircase. RNA is similar to DNA in its structure. It's single-stranded and it has some different a different nucleotide than DNA. But now I want to talk about ATP. So ATP falls under the nucleic acid category because it also contains a nucleotide base to it. So again, there's a phosphate, a sugar, and a nitrogen-containing base. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. And the triphosphate is telling us that there are 3 phosphate groups there, as we can see in the picture. ATP is the energy currency of our cells. And what I mean by that is whenever we need energy to do anything inside of our cells, we're going to need ATP there. Now, we've talked about glucose and triglycerides as being energy sources. And I didn't mention it, but protein can be used as an energy source too. All of those things contain calories, which are energy units. However, most of the machinery inside of our cells can't use things like glucose or proteins directly for energy. Just like, our house can't use wind energy directly for energy or for electricity. We have to convert the form of energy. So we take the energy that's in something like glucose and we convert it into the energy of ATP. And that is the form of energy that our cells can use. Just like we can take wind energy and convert it into electricity, and then that can be used inside of our homes. So ATP is a very important molecule for energy. It's so important that we have a hormone that regulates how much ATP we can make, and that's called your thyroid hormone. Thyroid hormone is actually 2 hormones better known by the abbreviations T3 and T4, and they're made in your thyroid gland, which is in your neck. And T3 and T4 are hormones that send messages to most of the cells in your body saying, go ahead and make ATP. And so that helps you to have energy. People that have hypothyroidism aren't making enough T3 and T4, and they tend to feel very tired because of that. As I mentioned, ATP is the energy currency of our cells, and these are just some examples of the different type of work that ATP can help us to do. So there's chemical work, right? If we want to build molecules, we got to supply energy to do that, and ATP can be used there. Transport work, like moving things into and out of a cell or moving things through a cell, that's going to require ATP energy. Or mechanical work, like contraction of the heart muscle, will require ATP energy.